We have audio. There you go. Yeah. So for those of you who missed it, when it's your turn to present, just come and table. Sorry.
We need to determine if Rachel's here, otherwise we do not have a quorum. I don't see her on the screen.
Probably not showing up.
Right. Okay, good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. This is the Village of New Paltz Planning Board, our regular meeting, July 19th, 2022. We're holding it here at Elting Memorial Library, and it is also being live streamed via Zoom. We have a number of different things to go over, but before we get going, I want to let you know that there are two site plan application reviews, there are two application reviews that have adjourned for this meeting and will be present next meeting. That is PB 2120, 107 Main Street, and PB 2207, 13 Plattekill Avenue. They will not be appearing tonight. So moving forward, we have some administrative business. We need the approval of the 7/5/22 minutes, which came to us, the minutes from the planning board meeting of that day. Rachel, did you get a chance to look at these? Everybody get a chance to look at them? I'd love to do this. Do we need to make any amendments, Rachel? Anything at all? Okay, so I'd like to get a motion to approve the meeting minutes. So, Rachel, may I have a second for me, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
So the next thing we're going to do is ask for village
I
board.
heard the motion in the second. I just don't know if you voted on the minutes. I heard the motion in the second, but did you vote on the minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
We are looking for village board, Ulster County Planning Board updates.
We don't see Bill.
And I don't see William Murray there, so we will move past that and make a note that if he shows up, we'll ask him for update. That goes as well for the Environmental Policy Board. We now have a closure request for PB 2103. That was 191, 193 Huguenot Street. The motion says a memo to the Village of New Paltz Planning Board regarding PB 2103. The following escrow account was established. The starting balance of $1,500. It says all law and or engineering firms that have been used by the planning board with reference to the above application have been contacted and have assured me that there are no outstanding invoices. I respectfully request that the planning board recommend to the treasurer and board of trustees that the following accounts be closed and that the remaining balances be returned to the applicant. PB 2103, 191, 193 Huguenot Street, $1,412.50. So I would like to get a motion to close the account and return the remaining balance to the applicant.
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Very good. So that has been taken care of. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to move to the public comment section. Are there any people here to speak generally in public comment? Yes, please. Join us up here. You have a seat at that table.
So I just wanted to make some comments shared from a neighbor that couldn't be here, as well as myself, if that's permitted.
Certainly, and this is in reference to what, sir?
This is in reference to PB 2121 proposed prospect subdivision.
Okay, go right ahead.
Okay, and my name is Terry Goldshine. I live at 10 Caroline Way, adjacent to the proposed subdivision lot. And my neighbor, John Oleski, had submitted a late public comment to the village just before the meeting. Just wanted to read some key points from that. And Mr. Oleski states that, and he's a resident, I believe it's 34 Prospect Street, that he does live just a couple of properties down on that street. He says at the outset, as a resident of Prospect Street, he continues to be seriously concerned with the continuing failure by the applicant and the board to address the health and safety issues that he raised at the last meeting where this application was addressed. At the outset, he notes for the board's attention that the very first thing stated in the village code subdivision policy are the importance of ensuring that A, land to be subdivided shall be of such character that it can be used safely for building purposes without danger to health or peril from fire, flood, accident noted, or other menace. B, proper provision shall be made for water, supply, drainage, sewage, and other needed public improvements and utilities. City Cites Village Code 178-2. And I won't read everything else there, but he says, given the legal mandates, he doesn't understand how the sophisticated applicant could be appearing again with nothing more than the same sketch plan as many fact. And then he just says it's clear that applicant did not comply with Village Code 178-11, consulting with the Ulster County Health Department regarding sewage issues. And I'll leave it off at that. The judge mentioned he believes the board should carefully consider CEQA requirements presented here as well. And I just support, for my part, support Mr. Oleski's comments. And as a resident, the proposed development, I add that the proposed development is not consistent with the predominant character of the existing built or natural landscape, the existing community. The 4 subdivided lots on 3/4 of an acre are designed more densely than surrounding properties at less than 1/5 of an acre each. The dense design will eliminate too many trees that serve as visual buffers now from the Henry Dubois and other properties, existing and proposed. Kniffen had designed and sold the homes on Caroline Way where my family lives now, which would be most impacted by this proposed subdivision. And now we're proposing to overdevelop the wooded area that was part of the appeal of the homes on Caroline Way originally. The proposed subdivision should not be approved in its current form. And as John Oleski, his comments I summarized, we remain very concerned, as are the other neighbors on Prospect Street who attended the last meeting, about the lack of adequate sewage now, with sewage overflowing multiple times a year. Our flagpole property overflowing on our flagpole adjacent to Prospect Street, as well as the other Prospect Street properties on either side of ours. And the stormwater discharge from the lot will likely flow across our property in greater volume than it does now, eroding the western boundary of our property. Thank you.
Thank you. Your comments have been noted and they'll be part of the record, and we'll use those as we move forward into the application. Autumn, are there any people that are online that want to speak to any of these matters?
Yes, Gilbert Plantinga here.
Yes, go right ahead, sir.
I'm Perry's next door neighbor on Caroline Way. And even without the sewage problems and whatnot that are discussed in this, these 2 letters, the visual impact and simply the way that this will change the character of the area by building on such small lots at such a great density that's not consistent with what I moved here for, and I really want to see something, somehow our concerns about the visuals addressed. So I'm not happy with this. I just needed to say basically what Perry and also our neighbor John had said in his letter. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Planning. I appreciate you coming here and speaking. And again, your comments have been noted. I did go out for an inspection. I believe both you and Perry were there at the time, and we did walk around through the property, so I'm familiar with the issues that you're discussing, as well as with the flooding issues that occurred on Prospect in that specific area. Are there any other people that are here to speak to anything on?
No, I'm not here about the
Okay. So we're going to now move from public comments to a public hearing. Tonight, we have a special use permit, commercial retail, other grocery, PB 2209, 87 North Chestnut. The applicant, Wendy Toman. The zoning district is NBR. So I would like, if I could please, to get a motion to open the public hearing. So, a second. Rachel? Unmute, Rachel.
Rachel,
Second. Aye.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, so the public hearing is now open. Is there anyone here to speak to the PB 2209 87 North Chestnut application? Is there anyone online here to speak to that
Yep.
application?
I'll offer a few words, John. Dave, can you hear me?
Yes, David, we can.
Yeah, I'll just say, you know, the second nature refillery that Wendy Toman has proposed for our commercial space at Zero Place could not be more consistent with the ethic of Zero Place, right? And its focus on sustainability and so forth. So, you know, I just can't imagine a better use for the building. That's all.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak to the special use permit for PB 2209? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to get a motion to close the public hearing, please.
So moved.
A second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
So the public hearing is now closed. We are now moving on to application review. First item on the application review is PB 2209 87 North Chestnut Street. Ms. Toman, if you please step up. Briefly here, we have, and actually please correct me if I'm wrong. It's an application for special use permit approval of a grocery for a quote unquote refillery, refill grocery consisting of approximately 676 square feet of retail, approximately 100 square feet of office and storage. We held a public hearing tonight. The issues that we have, actually, do you want to go ahead and just kind of briefly go over the issues that are still remaining?
Sure. I think there was, since last meeting, there's been a floor plan submitted, and there was some details about the signage that was also submitted. So based on that, I did propose or draft a proposed resolution of approval, and the issues that were outstanding were going to be incorporated as specific conditions of that approval. The first being that the sign would have to comply with the sign plan for Zero Place that was approved back for application number PB 1602, and that set forth specific dimensions and requirements as far as lighting, that type of thing. And the second was with respect to the parking, that prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy, the building inspector would need to confirm that the parking requirements for the proposed use are met. And that also ties back to the original Zero Place approval. I could read the specific conditions word for word if you want me to pull that up on my screen, if you want to discuss the resolution in general.
Let's first look at the resolution in general, see if we have any discussion with it. The proposal is that we do have a resolution for the special use permit, a resolution of approval for the special use permit for application PB 2209. And as Ashley stated, there are a couple of specifics that will be required before you get your certificate of occupancy. There are some general conditions, and then there are, again, some very specific conditions that we'll refer to our attorney to take care of. But is there any discussion regarding this application between members of the board? No?
Do we want to look at the sign proposal now, or do you want to look at the context of the resolution?
Well, we have looked at the sign proposed there, but yeah, if you want to go ahead and pull that up. Autumn, do you have a copy of the sign so we can take a look?
I looked at it offline. I want to make sure. There's specs here in the corner of that.
Here's the floor plan.
So the specs, as noted, for the sign itself are 4 feet by 3 feet approximately, material of solid wood. Overall size is 24 square feet, double-sided. It's going to be hung perpendicular with the iron bar. Location center over main door, 8 feet high, protruding less than 5 feet. Design painted white background, UV weatherproof. Lighting is going to be an LED auto on, off battery operated, installed above the sign and pointed down at the sign. So for all of you who are following along at home, this is what the sign is looking like. There you go. Just pull it up. Thank you, Autumn. Any discussion about that sign? Anything related to the sign? No? Okay. She did give me a window decal spec here, which would be part of the shop itself. And it's not outside. It would be floating on the glass with no border. So that was it as well. Actually, would you like to read some of the specifics required that we can the conditions before we move?
Sure, I will read just the specific conditions for the proposed resolution. Number 1 is that the sign must comply with the sign plan for Zero Place, application number PB 1602, and village sign regulations as to dimensions, color, and lighting. Number 2, prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy, the building inspector shall confirm that the parking requirements applicable to the grocery use and all collective uses in the building are met. And number 3, all conditions attached to the resolution of approval, subdivision, special use permit, and site plan for Net Zero Development LLC, Zero Place, application number 6 PB 1602, issued by the Village of New Paltz Planning Board, dated April 5th, 2018, and filed in the office of the village clerk on that same date, and amendments thereto are made a part of this approval, and this approval is subject to the same as if those conditions were set forth herein at length, except as otherwise specifically superseded herein. And then you have those standard general conditions as far as the approval being conditioned on any outside agency approvals that are needed, and certain time restrictions for exercising the special use permit.
Very good, thank you. So with that in mind, what I would like to do is I'd like to ask for a motion of approval for the special use permit for application number PB 2209. So moved. Second?
Second.
Hello, Dennis, thanks for being here. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Very good. So this has now been approved. You will need to speak with Autumn to get started on this, but other than that, you are approved as well.
Thank you so much.
Have it. I want your children on.
Okay. All right, so we're going to move into the next application review. This is for PB 2208, 8793 North Chestnut Street. I'm Mr. Libolt here. The general summary we've been through, we know that this is an application for a special use permit of a quote retail business not otherwise mentioned for a proposed approximately 2,000 square foot cannabis dispensary. So there are some, it's on, excuse me, let me start over again. The property is located on State Route 32, but is exempt from referral to the Ulster County Planning Board because it is a reoccupancy of or reuse of an existing structure, as long as the following conditions are met. Increase in parking space is not required by local statute, channelized access exists as proposed, and new sign lighting utilizes full cutoff luminaries. And there is a public hearing that is required. So the next step is that we need to review Corey's comments of 5/17/22, and then we'll have to discuss the status of the traffic review, and then there are a few other issues that we'll need to go through. So actually, if you want to educate us on Corey's, the responses to Corey's review.
Sure, I'd like to say that David Shepler is with us remotely as well.
So if you want the applicant to perhaps go over their response to those comments, I think that would be.
Sure, let's go ahead and do that. Mr. Libolt, if you would go right ahead, please.
Sure. We have cover letter states there's a pre-approved office area that's incorrect, as the area to be used as an accessory to be considered for a special use permit, and this area is included in the approval and permit. This should be made clear in the resolution of approval. I understand. We were segmenting the space at the time, but it is accessory to the retail use. So no matter what's there, it'll be part of the whole.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you write the name of the title of the file that we're going over?
It's PB 2208.
I know that. I'm saying the name, the title of the file, that's the response.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I think it was, we had another one that was sent.
It's not really the content that I reviewed earlier.
So the folder says,
Does it say responses for the planning board 7/19? Sorry to delay this.
yes, dated July 13th.
Thank you.
Okay.
These are works.
All right, so Mr. Libolt, go right ahead, please.
Sure. Point 2 was the supplemental part 5 completed by the applicant. The answer should be reviewed and discussed by the planning board. If any request for more information should be directed to the applicant immediately. If anybody have any questions to date so far, part 5 was submitted. The floor plan that was submitted was non-contextual, and that it only showed the space to be used, given the applicant self-determined that there were several areas in the proposed of different uses. There should be a more descriptive floor plan submitted to allow the planning board to discuss the literal operation of the business, operational flow path, ingress, egress, the linkage between retail stores and office. And so we do not intend to suggest the space had different uses. There's only one use, and all the elements of that space are in support of the single use. The details of the storage and office activities in support of the single retail use are immaterial. We have revised our application accordingly. Our request, it would be tremendously helpful if we could separate the general approval for the use, being the overall size and location, from the very detailed code requirements that are the purview of the inspector, fire code, other elements within the space. We can't provide the precise layout of all the store elements, the counters, the storage, and management, until down the road once the prospective tenant has committed. as we've said, they won't commit until they know that the use is approved. So we have like a chicken and the egg situation here. We were also contacted since we submitted this by the Office of Cannabis Management through their representative. And they've asked if they could occupy the space. They would like to do a project of social and economic equity with a dispensary there. And the state of New York has set aside money for people in communities that have been disproportionately impacted by state policies. And the mayor actually referred them over to us. They took a look at the space and they would like to do a project there. And we're actually kind of on board with that. We'd like to do that. They did, however, ask for 35 to 4,000 square feet of space.
So is this? Let me see this up.
That's okay.
You have a current applicant who wants to do a dispensary.
Yeah, the current applicant who's come to us and wanted.
We're testing you.
What? We'd like to rent the space. He would like 2,000 square feet for their operation. This member from the Office of Cannabis Management would like approximately 3,500 to 4,000 square feet. They break the spaces up differently, and it was the only reason that I brought up the different uses within the space, how they lay them out. I've done some research. Every operation is different. Within the space, there's an administrative space and there's a security space where obviously they store product. There's 24-hour security within the space. And there's very specific requirements within the licensure at the state level that they'll have within the space. It has to do with health and human safety, air quality. The spaces we have are pre-programmed and the doors of entry and exit are there. People will come and go in the pre-programmed spaces that we've already approved through the review and approval process that we've had. Our request is that we can get to a general approval on the use. David agrees with me, and then we could, if the board still has concern, we could come back with the individual fit out. But I'm sure that the zoning enforcement officer is going to do a thorough review of their layout and make sure all the appropriate upfits are done. Obviously, we're not allowing any of the prospective users here to go outside what we pre-approved as far as signage or any of the other particulars with the individual space. And the licensure is not going to be issued till the last quarter of this year. But once we have that approval, we'll go back to the prospective users. They'll invest money in design and come back with an actual floor plan. The first user that requested the 2,000 square feet did produce that rendering from a similar location. It's very clean, upscale. That's the general fit out for the retail space. I can't really speak to what the office space looks like. I know that it will comply with the code, as will whatever storage facility. The big difference in my conversations with the Office of Cannabis Management is the storage space in their proposed use seems to be a lot larger than what we'll call the corporate user would provide. And so their back office is a lot larger and they've requested more space.
So I think what's being asked, and I'm looking to clarify that, we're looking to consider this as a concept for how the space might get occupied, but we're not being at, or I don't think we can be asked to provide an approval for the use in any specific way.
Right, so we're being asked for general concept approval as opposed to a specific applicant.
Or even the ability to discuss and highlight some of the key considerations that this applicant that then would come with a complete application would need to consider to have that approved.
Well, as far as site plan goes, we've included a parking calculator, which David can speak to. And as far as the exterior of the building goes, we
it's pretty much laid out. So the code related issues, the building code related issues are inside the walls. So it's really a question of, is there a different impact between 2,000 and say 3,800 square feet or 3,500? That's why when I came last time, I said, look, can we approve a set amount of footage and what are the effects from a planning standpoint? And I actually have visited a couple of dispensaries. Some are smaller, some are larger. Everybody has their own, how they like to lay out the interior space. It seemed to me that the smaller spaces just get more deliveries, right? Because they have smaller storage, but the retail is about the same for most of them. And then how they run their back office and what they want to pay for back office space varies.
And it's the case that, I'm sorry to interrupt, I'm just trying to understand the consideration of 3,500. So is it the case that within the current existing available retail space in Zero Place that there could be up to 35 to 4,000 feet available for this use?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now we have 4 spaces available. And we have Epic One, which is a local WeWork group, is looking at 2 of the spaces. They haven't committed.
But those are labeled Epic One on there.
Right, correct. Just to show you, and the applicant we had for the dispensary, the first applicant was looking at retail, the 2, 109 and 108. When the Office of Candidates Management came in and toured, they liked retail 107, 108, and 109. So since we don't have an LOI from any of the proposed users, we're here, we've got this retail space. I really wanted to make sure we could address traffic because that's, really a thing for the retail space. And I know David worked ad nauseum on that, the parking calculator, and we actually took traffic counts and were very impressed that it actually, the real world at capacity residential load is actually a little less than what we projected in that spreadsheet. So I think Phil Greeley and Barry Mettenbach's office and David did a good job in actually developing that model as, that would project out the use in traffic, car load that would actually do that.
Okay. So let's look then, I go ahead and finish, I'm sorry, finish your presentation on.
I'm just going, that's all I've got. We can just continue to go through the questions.
In terms of traffic, and this is an issue that I think is important. I went and looked at several dispensaries in Massachusetts, get an idea of what was going on, spoke to some of the management team that was there. And one of them in Fall River, Mass, sat close to the highway. And it sat close to a residential area, and there was traffic that was coming from 2 directions. And the manager spoke about it, and he said initially it was chaos. He says, when we developed a traffic management plan, and this traffic management plan, they had an officer from Fall River who was simply directing traffic. They would circle around the building, they would take orders, they would check this, that, and the other. And then there was a limited amount of parking. You were only allowed to proceed once another parking place opened up, and then they exited out. I guess one of the things that we've asked for and we'd like to have our consultant study is the traffic management plan on how you would produce, how you would manage the traffic, given that you have traffic that would be coming from the village and turning left to go in, coming from 32 possibly to go in, and the parking lot is a kind of a closed area. So what we want to try to do is to create or to have a traffic management plan that can speak to that. I know that during the weekdays when the residents may not be there, it might not be quite the issue. However, on the weekends when the residents are there, and their parking spaces are taken and are either available for that, plus the most recent retail application we just approved. And I'm trying to determine how you could facilitate that. That's one of the pieces of the study that we really want to look at, and then, because I really don't understand traffic that well, and I'm not professional at it, we want to have our consultant take a look at it so we can get his interpretation of it. Granted, I trust that you're making good calculations. I just need to kind of check and see where that's going and how it operates. Do you have any sort of idea how that's going to operate just off the top of your head that you could offer us?
Well, I'll let David speak to that in a minute, but I would like to say, where did you go visit the dispensary?
One in Fall River, one in Lee, and then one in the Berkshires. I can't remember exactly where.
And why did you go there?
Because once we started discussing having a dispensary, it's on my route coming back from a business appointment, and I thought, well, we'll see what's going on and see how they handle it, just to get some independent view of it.
I mean, so I was in Canada and I stopped at 3 in Canada. But in Canada, they're allowed in the province I was in. And there was none of that. And the reason why I went to Massachusetts is because there's none in New York. So where's everybody from New York going right now?
They're going to Massachusetts.
They're going to one of the Berkshires. They're going to all the stops in Maine. Because I've talked to people about where they currently get their recreational cannabis, and that's where they all drive to. 2 of the 3 you mentioned. When these licenses come out in New York, and the state, I mean, if you talk to people in the Office of Cannabis Management, they said within 5 years they're going to be in any community that's willing to have them. So you're not going to get large geographic areas traveling to these few dispensaries because they're going to be here. The first tranche of licenses, I think they're going to issue 100, could be wrong, it's 130 throughout the state. The Office of Cannabis Management, just for the social equity program, visited 1,500 locations and whittled it down to 50. And this is one of the 50. So I understand your concern. The users that I've asked, I just brought it up. I said, look, the community has a concern, and this is their concern. And they said, well, like any other retail outlet, when we first opened, it's very busy. He goes, but in the communities we've opened in where it's been legalized in those states, he goes, within 2 or 3 weeks, it slows down. And the one user offers a delivery service, and he goes, by the second month, people just call in like they do for pizza. And the delivery van is busy just delivering all the time. So I don't know if that helps your concern. I don't know how.
And I agree, the initial rush of something new will be pretty huge. And then the taper off as it becomes more custom, people become more accustomed to it, and as other operations open. So it will kind of dilute the amount of traffic at a location. But it is a concern. I would hate to see, I don't want to see traffic going down into the Huguenot neighborhood, of course, neighborhood either. And David worked very diligently to create a plan that wouldn't force traffic into that area. We've spoken to another applicant who's going to build across the street from where you are, and more or less mandated that you can't have traffic turning left and going down into the neighborhood. And it's those sorts of concerns that we're looking at. It's just how to handle that initial rush, and then how to manage the normal traffic that occurs there so that it doesn't impede the flow of traffic in that area or go into the neighborhood.
Would you like to speak to that further, David?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would add is I too saw the traffic at the Lee dispensary when it first opened, and it basically served all of the Hudson Valley, right? And if you go to Great Barrington now, where there are numerous dispensaries, there are no traffic issues at all. If you go to the Cape in Massachusetts, there are none. I'm in Maine currently, and there are dispensaries all over the place. In fact, Vermont, all the neighboring states of New England, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Massachusetts, all have legalized recreational marijuana now. And it's quite common, and you're not seeing those kinds of traffic issues. When when this is legalized in the state of New York, there will be multiple, many, what did you say again, Keith? 150 initial dispensaries and then many more to follow. And so I don't think the extreme circumstances that we saw in Lee, which was not only on the highway, but it was an isolated dispensary all by itself, adjacent to a state with a great thirst for this product, right? And so we just simply don't expect anything other than the kind of traffic that you might expect at a new restaurant. People are like a little curious, but you're not going to get people from Massachusetts driving here. You're not going to get people from Albany driving here. So I think that our focus is what is the steady state traffic and parking needs of this business, and we'll deal with the initial interest in a commonsensical way.
Do you have any thoughts about what that means more specifically? Like, how would we deal with that unique consideration of the likely, traffic and parking demand before the statewide market is mature? I'm hearing you say you deal with it in a commonsensical way, but is there any thoughts about what that might look like? It's a pretty unique consideration.
Yeah, Keith,
prove.
maybe you can kind of take them through, like, I think the best comparison that we have for this is at the Zero Place grand opening, right? Where we had, I think, upwards of 150 to 200 people attending. So that was well beyond what you're going to experience with a dispensary like this opening at the same time with many other dispensaries in the state. And so we had a person posted at the entrance who would direct people, and a number of other measures. We could talk through that if that's of interest to you. I mean, to be clear, we don't have a baked, kind of traffic management plan for the grand opening of a dispensary, right? That's a little early for us. We need a conceptual approval now, so that we can then get into the details with these dispensary concerns, as Keith has mentioned. I'm happy to entertain the idea of providing such a plan to your satisfaction, but I strongly prefer that we make that as part of this kind of conceptual approval, as opposed to baking all this stuff in now before we've even got a commitment from a dispensary.
Hey, I have one question. When we did Net Zero, David, you had Mauser came and did a traffic flow study that was quite expensive. Wouldn't they have considered something with the amount of traffic that we're saying would be anticipated? Because at the time, you didn't have any idea who was actually going to be going into that. So I would have thought that they would have, when they did their traffic study, would have considered it to be the maximum amount of traffic that would occur based upon different businesses going into that facility. So to me, it looks like it was already done.
Yeah, there's no doubt, and we can get into the nitty gritty of exactly that, Dennis, here, with all the stuff that I provided you guys, right? The special use calculator that we actually discussed back in 2018, and we can go through all of that. You're absolutely right that I am extremely confident that we have parking sufficient to meet the steady state needs of all the uses that we're considering right now. I think what Rich and John are bringing up is sort of this anomalous parking demand that's based on this kind of initial interest for a couple weeks, right? And to be fair, I would love to say that that our models address something as extreme as that, but they don't, right? I'll just be honest about it. And so I think it's fine for us to come up with, a plan that meets everybody's kind of common sense test. on how we manage that initial surge of interest. We don't know what that'll be. We don't even know if it's going to happen, but we should be prepared. It's fine. We should be prepared for that. All I'm asking is that we do that, you know, that we do that as a next phase.
Actually, do you want to weigh in on any of this?
Sure, I was just going to actually just speak to how the village planning board grants approvals and permits, and there's no such thing as a conceptual approval. So if you're seeking a special use permit, then it will have to meet all the requirements of that, just as, you know, any site plan approval would have to. So I think because this use is something that was different and not part of the original net zero approval, that's why these types of, and understanding that you might not know the specific tenant, you know, the use and the types of traffic implications that would be associated with the use. And that's something that the board would need to be reviewing, or wants to review prior to authorizing the use. Because I think, as Rich had mentioned before, it's really an approval for the use versus an approval for a specific entity or business.
It sounds like the traffic concerns are really, it doesn't.
Sorry,
That's, if I,
Well, that's
I
part
walk,
of it, yeah.
I walk the neighborhood, right? Because I've tried to get into the Water Street Market on Saturday.
Right.
And there's nowhere to park. So what do? I go up and I park in the lot up by Starbucks and just walk down. You know, as far as like a common sense plan, obviously, if we're one of the earlier dispensaries and there's a lot of curiosity, certainly we'd have someone outside managing traffic, and we would not want, there's nowhere to park on Mulberry Street unless you're handicapped. There's a couple of handicap spots there. So obviously you would deter them from going into the historic district. We could work with the village on how we do that, whether we want us to just make that a no turn temporarily, cone it off. And we would send people to the other public parking in the village, or they would come back later. But I can't, it's hard to really speak to, like, well, what's it gonna look like? I just don't, I don't know.
That might be enough of a rationale to try to get some people that can advise, because this has happened. The idea of the first tranche of licenses being issued in a state that was formerly not legal, or went from medical to recreational. It's happening right now in New Jersey, for example. Now, you might argue that New York people are going to New Jersey, and that's tipping the scales a little bit. But I think there are some analogs, and you know, real analog scenarios for dispensaries of this scale in comparable communities that opened in the first lot of licenses, because 130 sounds like a lot, but New York's a big state with a lot of consumption. Probably not a lot, you know. So I think, I think we're doing. First of all, I appreciate Ashley's comment, because we're not being asked to approve anything. It's not what we do, as far as I understand. And I also appreciate the focus that we're getting to, which is this concept of traffic and overall parking volume for a period of time when the market for cannabis throughout New York won't be mature. And this has the potential to be a destination for people from more than one community that want to buy. And I think that, David, your points are all well made, and I think common sense certainly will prevail, but it won't be a 2 to 3 week consideration. It probably could be a 2 to 3 year consideration, given the amount of lag time for producing more licenses and the market to mature. So I just think that's really where my focus is, where we want to spend some time and potentially even some research or some comparable information. And we could probably use the folks from the state to help us. They must be getting this same question from communities that were comfortable with the approval of a potential issuance of a license, but yet are still worried about what it would mean to the traffic flow and parking consideration.
One other consideration is that in addition to having the general population, we have a large body of student population that bears down on us every September, and live here until May and leave. So that's an additional 5,000 to 7,000 people that we have to take into account. And although we can't predict their behavior, I think this would be much easier to predict that they would flow to it. So I think the idea, Dennis, thank you for the comment on the Mauser study. Is it possible that we could take that Mauser study and use it as a model and see if there are any additions that we might need to make or anything that we can do to record, rather than go back and start from the very beginning? You've got the base already completed.
No, I'll acknowledge that. It's actually nicely done in what was provided with the spreadsheet. I think that just like any calculation or analysis like this, there's a fundamental assumption that's made in it that makes it work. But if that fundamental assumption is wrong, then it's not no longer true. And I think the fundamental assumption is that this is a typical retail business. And I just don't think that's the case. It's actually atypical because it's a retail business that's not even permitted just yet and will be eventually. First of many, but the first, tranche of them. So I think that's just where I think that's great that the calculator was made to preemptively address these types of issues. But somehow what we thought the calculator would do is not working in this case because it's presenting something totally unique that doesn't have the same comparables that a laundromat or a cafe or other things have available to us.
Hey, Rich and John, since you mentioned it, what was this guy's name? Dr. Phil from Mauser?
Phil
David,
Greeley, yeah. Yes.
maybe you would want to just give him a call. I'm sure they might have information that dealt with these dispensaries in different areas. I mean, it's a big company. I'm sure that they could provide you with some information on traffic flow.
Yep, and sort of what basically characterize the demand as best we can, right? What is the surge in the beginning? How quickly does it dissipate?
It's impossible to know.
Yeah, right. But we can do some research there and get back.
Just a point of clarification, again, because there's not a lot of information about the operation. It's not intended to be a lounge, but only a dispensary for sale. Right.
Rachel, do you have any thoughts that you want to add?
This is a
All right, go ahead and continue to.
I know David worked really hard with me to run the traffic, so I think he really ran through all the
yeah. I'm in a meeting.
And I would also say, you're absolutely right, the parking study, the model versus actual is proving quite accurate. But again, it just reinforces it's proving quite accurate on a predictable form of use. That's all. So I think we're on to what the issues are. And I think we just need some information. So David,
we do have some data, Keith, of what the existing the cannabis operator mentioned as to what they're expecting. We do have some data on that, and it complies exactly with the retail projections that we have of the dispensary in steady state. But you're looking for more than that. You're looking for some sense of characterizing the initial surge and how we manage that, and we can do that. We don't have a crystal ball, but we can certainly ground it. We can ground it in the best analogs we can find, and we'll go do that.
Okay, great. Great.
So just so we understand your concern, your primary concern is people going into Mulberry Street.
Well, my primary concern is that given its location, this area, and with the potential traffic coming from two different directions, and with the potential of having a large, heavy use initially, and I understand a year from now it won't be, but how do we handle that initial surge so that we can make sure that the traffic flow is complete, that we minimize the opportunity for accidents, we don't have people that are floating down into the neighborhood to try to find parking spaces and things of that nature. So it's just to kind of, how do we handle the initial surge of that? Because I think it's going to be, and hopefully for whoever occupies it will be much more robust than anticipated. So I just want to make sure that we're prepared for it.
I think, John, it would
Actually-
make sense maybe if, so it seems like the applicant, they understand what your concerns are. I think it's twofold, but the initial surge and also generally, making sure the prior traffic study accounts for this type of use. So I think perhaps if there was a revised traffic analysis that was submitted that you can then have reviewed by your consultant, I think that would really be the first step.
Okay, very good. So that will be the first step. When do you think you'd be able to review that and get that information back, just so we can keep this moving along?
Yeah, we'll talk to Phil Reedy's office and just see, like, they're doing development a long time. I have no idea how you can, like, I'm not a traffic expert, but it's one of these unusual things, like, how do you manage a grand opening? It's gonna involve someone being out front, directing traffic till it calms down. We're gonna make that part of their lease, that they're responsible for unusually high traffic volume and we're gonna lay out what that's gonna look like. But to actually predict traffic flows and how what we're going to do with that excess traffic, that's gonna be up to the traffic engineer to tell us what to do.
Yeah, and yeah, and we had a much larger demand of traffic at our grand opening for a day, and we had no complaints, not a single complaint from neighbors, and certainly no one was going down to Huguenot Street. There's a good amount of public parking available in the general area, so we'll just come up with a plan that addresses that and pulls from that experience, in addition to trying to figure out as best we can characterizing that initial surge in let's call it interest traffic. Okay.
One more.
In terms of getting
I
to,
know you did speak about, I had it fresh in my head. I know you spoke about potentially the square footage might be, there's a potential that it might increase above the, I think, 2,000 that this application's for. So just something to consider with the traffic analysis. So you don't have to go back, just to perhaps be conservative and consider if it was going to be larger than what's initially thought.
Sure. The good thing is the amount of square footage doesn't drive interest traffic, right? It's the existence of the place that drives interest traffic. But anyway, I hear you, and we will certainly not ignore any implications that deal with square footage. Are there any other aspects so that we better understand when you say there's no such thing as a conceptual use? And sorry, right after you said that, I lost power here and had to move to a cell phone, so I was out for a minute or something. Is there what else? So you're saying, did I understand correctly that there's only a special use permit application period? They're all the same. There's nothing that you.
I guess, and there was some talk earlier about distinguishing between planning board approvals versus building code. So the actual, the specifics of the floor plan, making sure that's in accordance with building code, that's something that gets done with the building inspector before a building permit or CO is issued. So this board would approve the use and would have to analyze the impacts and effects of the use, but you wouldn't then return back to this board unless there was something that was going to change that this board would have authority to.
Got it. Got it. And is there anything else besides this traffic parking stuff that you want to understand as we contemplate this use?
There are a couple of other things here. Of course, we need to get the special use, the SUP narrative going, so we have that review. One of the topics that comes up from some of the other research that I've done, and following the SUP and Village Code, it says such businesses shall be reviewed for its ability to function without negative impacts such as traffic and noise. on neighboring properties. And then it goes to ask a few other questions. One of the things that is noteworthy is and I think you addressed it briefly in passing, is the odor and the air handling.
Yes.
Given that these facilities do have a specific odor that's related to them, and rather than, and I'm sure that David worked with you on this so that it doesn't, of course, float up into the upstairs, so that every apartment suddenly has the odor running through it. But likewise, so that air is not untreated and is ejected, that would then float into the neighborhood. Something, if you could give us some idea, and you don't have to do it exactly now, but how that would be addressed, just so that would, as part of your special use permit.
Sure, well, all of, you know, we have a LEED platinum net zero energy building, so all the air in the interior goes through HRVs, and they all have, I think, MERV 11 filters, like, you know, the particle removing filters, and it's designed to do exactly that, to clean the air and scrub it and bring fresh air in and exhaust the foul air out. So it's already built into the breathing system for the building, and the larger we actually upsized those units already for retail use. So there's three units, one for each of the spaces if they were to take 3 spaces.
Okay. 2 other things that we don't have to talk about now, but just want to put them on the bullet points. One is waste and disposal. So there is, I think there are expirations and other waste need to be discarded when you have product. Yeah. And you should come back with some security that waste will be put in a way that won't maybe attract people, you know, dumpster diving, looking for product. It's real in the industry. So I would just say how you're going to handle secure waste. And it's also in code, I would imagine, for having a license. Yeah, it's part of that. It's part of it. And then the other part of SCP is just security. It's cash business. So not only product risk, but also just security for how you manage transference of cash and how that doesn't ever create a risk to the building occupants or other.
Yeah, there's a specific, that's all part of the state licensure. There's a very specific way in which the transactions are handled. Yeah.
So actually, what are our next steps? Go from here.
But can I just add one comment to what he was saying, what Keith said about the odor stuff? Just, you're probably already aware of this, but this is a smoke-free building in addition, right? No one's able to smoke within, is it 50 feet, Keith? And certainly there's no combustion in this store, right? And we would frown deeply upon anyone using this product openly on the streets near Zero Place. So just adding that as well.
Okay. All right, so really, actually, if you give us an idea of what our next steps are, as far as I see it, we need to get the traffic information and the management plan on that. We need to have our look at that. Our consultant look at that. We need to get the special use permit narrative from you, and what else we need to do here, actually.
I think those are really the next steps. I note that there was, I believe, a special use permit narrative given previously, but I think it'd be helpful if some of the questions you raised just now about the odor and those items, the waste disposal, if there's perhaps that was updated to address those concerns as well. But I think the next big thing is just the traffic and having then the traffic reviewed by your own consultant.
Okay. And then we just want to keep this process moving along. We don't want it to stop.
On this one, I was going.
What's that?
That meeting is canceled, we have to schedule that public hearing.
Right along.
You do need a public hearing on this application. I would suggest though waiting until you have this additional information. That way it's available for the public to review as far as the traffic and other items.
If we get that back next week and perhaps our next opportunity, then perhaps we can get a public hearing schedule and All right, thank you. Okay, so the next item on our list is we have PB 2121 Prospect Street, Henry W. Dubois Avenue, for Kniffen. Application to subdivide a 0.77 acre parcel into 4 lots for construction of single-family homes. See here. So we need to review the revised sketch plan. Did we get any information from Dennis Larry? Okay. So welcome back, Floyd. Why don't you give us a few updates on what's going on with your site plan?
Sure. So we submitted a revised map to show proposed, there's limited proposed grading on the upper lots, 1 and 2, and pulling those footprints of the buildings towards Henry W. Dubois in an effort to reduce the amount of disturbance on the back of those lots, as well as to reduce the amount of stormwater going towards Prospect Street. We had that meeting back in the beginning of June with the neighbors, and that seemed to be one of the bigger issues related specifically to this property. There was also issues brought up about overflowing storm drain down the street, towards Main Street, as well, and then just how the stormwater would flow from this property onto Prospect Street.
I'm sorry, would you repeat that, please?
There was one concern specifically about how the stormwater flows currently towards Prospect Street, and then how it will flow post-development. And then I had submitted the original survey that had a delineating line for which direction the stormwater goes. It's like that. It's the original survey with a blue line, sort of a ridge line to the property. Everything on the south side heads toward Prospect Street. Everything on the north side heads towards Henry Dubois. And along with that, the revised ridge line post-development, how it's being proposed now with the limited grading that I'm doing on 1 and 2, lots 1 and 2. In an effort to actually reduce the amount of stormwater heading towards Prospect Street. I'm not sure if Dennis saw that or responded to that.
Okay. Go ahead.
So can I just speak to some other concerns that were brought up?
Sure.
During the meeting. Again, I tried to address the items that came up at our site meeting. But also, there was a comment made that this subdivision is not consistent with the neighboring properties, and I just want to note that I'm not asking for any variances. Zoning here has been the zoning since zoning's been in effect in the village in the 60s. 1/6 of an acre is essentially how the village was subdivided back in the 20s with Oakwood Park subdivision. So all those streets are 1/6 acre lots originally, and that's how the village adopted the 1/6 acre plot. There was no zoning change that allowed me more density. I'm just going with the 1/6 of an acre requirement that the village has and has always had. So I don't think these lots are inconsistent with the neighborhood. They're exactly what the rest of the village in that area, Prospect Street, Grove Street, Mill Rock, and North Oakwood, they were all subdivided originally 1/6 acre lots. These are actually slightly larger than that.
But do you also know, specifically, can you tell us the lot size of the surrounding properties, in particular, if there's any comment? They're on the map.
Sure, those are closer to 1/4 acre.
Can you do it in feet and square feet like your stuff? Even if not now, maybe you can bring that back. to us.
Sure. Just help us look at that comparative as well.
And there's a bit of a range in the lots that we've drawn to, sure, 9,000, from 7,700 to 9,000.
That was mainly due to characteristics of the site and the corner lot and setbacks based on corner lots, more larger.
You mentioned stormwater in the drawing. In terms of stormwater, would we be getting something from
We have,
I don't think that's
note that just came in from this area. And a note that came from Rich Ruth and Blue for Williger. So the blue from Rich Ruth, so Dennis Blue and I reviewed the subdivision plans of Mr. Kniffen. Don't see any problems with it. We would like to see the water sewer connection details when they become available, and we assume that someone is reviewing the stormwater details and other village code requirements. I don't know who that would be if it were not those specific people. Then we have notes from Dennis Larios, and you'll be provided all this. Says details on water and sanitary connections will be required for each lot. Construction detail for the rain garden will be required. Site stormwater flow on each lot will be required. Roof leaders and paved areas, rain gardens. Rain garden sizing will be required and under drain through the village system. So for those who don't understand under drain, can you explain a bit of how that under drain works?
Yes, and he's referring to if there is an event that, the rain gardens are designed to a certain standard set by DEC to be able to accept a certain event, rain event. And I don't know specifically if it's 2 inches in 12 hours or whatever it is. If there's a rain event that's significantly more than that, there will be an overflow, and where that overflow goes, I'm assuming.
So in reviewing the revised sketch plan, we have issues that involve street drainage and runoff. Anyone wanted to delve a little further into that? The code requires the runoff of the project to be the same for or less than the amount of runoff before the plan. Next item we should do, if we feel confident in having discussed a bit on the sketch plan regarding issues of street drainage. I guess one of the questions I have with street drainage is, is that it all flows, and correct me if I'm wrong, it all flows to a very small access point that goes under the street and then goes out on a creek which actually ends up on someone's property. I don't know how that can be affected because it's a village problem. It's not a development problem. It's a village problem. We of course want to reduce as much as we can the flow of water and the excess that would come off of that. But if you can make a note, I think we ought to ask Blue how we can make that situation better. Because right now it's already bad, and if there is an increase in flow of water, it's just going to make it worse, and it actually ends up flooding several properties, not just I mean this property next right next door to where you are, which is and Muller property. It floods that as well, and it floods all down the Prospect Street area, and the point is really over here, which is a bit higher than the actual lower part. So we need to ask Blue to weigh in on how we can make that better for the other property owners.
The increase in stormwater you're referring to is because of the impermeable surface, not because of other changes.
Both. Well, I am required to not increase stormwater runoff through stormwater management and specifically the rain gardens, and that's what Dennis is asking, those details. And those will need to be reviewed by him, right, to make sure that they satisfy the DC requirements.
So it's a good question where there's already an existing issue within current infrastructure. Talking to Blue about what is being or could be done about that, because even though it's the result of poor current infrastructure, we couldn't prove something that would exacerbate the problem yet knowingly. Right. That's the issue.
So we'll make a note to try to reach out to Blue. You can reach. You can call me tomorrow on that. And I'll try to get to work on that. Dennis or Rachel, any comments, any feedback, any contribution to this discussion?
Well, I've looked at it quite extensively. It looks like for the most part, everything has been covered. Certainly we need more housing in New Paltz. To me, everything looks fine.
We'll get that working then with Luke to discuss that. The next thing is issue, and again, actually correct me if I'm wrong in the next steps, a discussion of whether the land is subject to limiting physical conditions such as shallow depth to bedrock or extreme wetness. Part of the village code. We may want to have the village engineer weigh in on the presence of any limiting physical conditions.
Sure. So this deals with, so you have before you now, it's in the sketch plan phase of the subdivision. So at the last appearance, you had noted some things that needed to be corrected on the sketch plan in order to comply with the requirements of the village code. The next step is for you to decide because whether to have the applicant go through the preliminary plat requirements or straight to the final plat. And you would be waiving the preliminary plat requirements. In order to do that, you would have to find that the land is not subject to limiting physical conditions such as shallow depth to bedrock or extreme wetness. So I don't know if that's been discussed with the village engineer or not. I know there was talk about stormwater questions. I haven't seen the comments, so I'm not sure how specific.
They're not fairly specific.
Can I respond to that? The sketch.
It's not his full report.
Right. These are just initial comments. These aren't his full report.
Sure, but I'm just going to back up here. We had sketch plan review back in the fall. It was determined by Rick, I thought in one of his notes that based on the number of lots and the specifics that I would go for subdivision plat. So I think that's already been addressed. Previously, that's why my submission is for subdivision plat. This is not sketch plan, that's already been done back in the fall. So, I mean, she keeps referring to.
But I
the
guess so
sketch
the
plan.
question is, so there's two different types of courses it could take, and whether it's a preliminary and then final or just final. And I don't believe that determination has been made yet.
So I think Rick made comments back in the fall that maybe we can review. I don't think I have.
Because I'm looking at your map now, it is still called a sketch plan. So perhaps that's just how it's been titled, but there were certain things that had to be added onto the plan, which were in order to move on from the sketch plan phase, but there needs to be a determination of whether, let me just pull up the exact wording here. So if it involves if it involves 4 lots, let me just pull up the exact code. 1 second.
Dennis said, details on water and sanitary connections will be required for each lot. Construction detail for the rain garden is required. Site stormwater flow on each lot will be required. All to be handled at site plan. If each lot is required to have a site plan approval, but appropriate notes on these issues should be included on the subdivision plat.
So the next step is, because it's a subdivision that involves not more than 4 lots, if the board finds that it is not subject to limiting physical conditions such as shallow depth to bedrock or extreme wetness, then you can waive the preliminary plat requirements and permit the subdivider to furnish just the final plat requirements. So that's the next.
What are the preliminary requirements that you mentioned?
So it's just an additional stage of review, going to preliminary and then final versus just going straight to final.
Would Dennis's final report affect that, or is it just something that we could then take up at the final plat?
So that's the standard. It's whether the board, if you don't think that the property is subject to limiting physical characteristics, then you would waive the preliminary plat requirements and go straight to final. If you do think that there are physical limiting characteristics, then you would be unable to waive those. Or if you need further input to make that determination, that's another option.
So actually, the members of the board would be able to determine those limiting characteristics. We need to see whether they were addressed in the fall during this conversation, this early meeting that you're describing, or whether they need to be addressed now. I'm not going to be involved on my time.
Do we have the notes from the fall that were made by Rick?
Because anecdotally, we're extremely well, might be something that's already been determined with comment on.
And the
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the notes now from, it was the meeting in May, where there were certain things that were missing from the sketch plan, including the scale of the location map and other specific things required to have an adequate sketch plan, and those were requested in May. Those have since been added. So that's why you're at that stage now of whether you're going to preliminary and final.
okay, so really what we're looking at, weighing in on the presence of limiting physical conditions, subject to limiting conditions, since subject involved in 4 lots, would it be related to the wetness or the depth of the depth of the land there. So, granted, there's stone there that forms the hillock that comes down. How deep is that? How are you addressing that? Is it right at the stone level, the bedrock level, or there's a little narrative?
Well, the main thing is, we're not doing any basements, so there won't be any excavation into any bedrock beyond what's in the slab. I'll tell you, the entire village has bedrock issues. On every village lot I've been on, there's always been bedrock issues. So I don't know if there is a more specific guidance on what limits, what is a limiting condition, what is not a limiting condition. I think that's more for the engineer, your engineer to bring it up.
Okay, so if we're going to ask Dennis to weigh in to this information by virtue of his final report, then that's going to require us to go to preliminary, then to the final, as opposed to just going directly to final.
Yeah, I don't.
You can ask if you wanted Dennis to weigh in before to whether, you know, if he was to weigh into whether those are physical limiting characteristics or not. You can have him weigh in on that actual question and then decide which way to go based on that.
Okay. You don't need to do the preliminary, so no.
Okay, so we need to ask Dennis to go ahead and weigh in on that information so that we can make a determination, so that we can determine how quickly we can move directly to the final, as opposed to going to the preliminary stage.
The only other point I heard and I didn't mention earlier, I'm new to this plan when we joined the board recently, but the only other thing I heard was around elimination of trees and what was formerly tree coverage for the adjacent properties. I don't know if any tree removal has been done already or that's part of the plan, but can you want to comment on that and what's been done or?
We haven't done any tree removal on the property. My plan was to pull the houses on lots 1 and 2 because those have the biggest impact on the lots to the south of the property. Was to pull those as forward as I could to make the driveways work still. And I'm almost to about the front half of the property. There's a slight bit of grading behind the houses, so you're left with about, I would say, 30–35% of the back half of the lots untouched. Zoning requires a 25% back on a lot more than that. Yes.
And that's the part of the land that is sloping upwards to the rise on top of the tallest point along the block, as I remember. Yeah.
And then lot 4 would be the other consideration. What's the setback there and what's the tree cover and visibility there?
Sure. So as you see, like a typical village house, because the lots are narrow, typically the gables face the roads in the narrow part. So it's typically how I orient them. But on that lot, I turn it so again, so I can push it as far forward towards Prospect Street. So the impact on those other lots. Not as much in Muller, she's going to be impacted no matter what. I'm having the house next to me. The specifics to the houses would be addressed for site plan, since the village requires site plan review for certain houses. So I think that's what Dennis was saying as far as once I know the actual footprint of the house, where the garage is and all that, I can then design specifically rain garden design. We've accounted for those spots, and I think there's no related to that. Footprints of houses are shown, rain garden footprints are shown just showing that they're done. And I don't remember if Rick's comments were written comments or just on the Zoom meeting. And I remember him specifically discussing the need to go from preliminary or not preliminary. it really doesn't, I don't think it really makes a difference in the overall picture, it's just one less step.
Right.
Like, I think the end result's the same, it's just saving you a step.
Right, if we can get the information back from Dennis, then we can move directly to the final approval on that. So really what is left for us to do is we need to, under seeker, make classification of this as an unlisted action. So I need please a motion to classify this as an unlisted action under seeker.
So motion.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
And Rachel?
Rachel, you're on mute.
You can unmute, please.
Give us a thumbs up, thumbs down.
So I have a couple questions.
Do you want
I-
to just vote on just while that motion's open? Did you vote on that?
We need to finish the voting on the motion to put this as an unlisted action, Rachel. So while we're waiting for you, either an aye or a nay.
And that is to make it, have it go through preliminary,
No, this is to classify it as
To
an
classify
unlisted
as
action
secret.
under seeker.
unlisted. Okay, I guess I don't have any choice. What I would want to know, I mean,
Was that a
well,
yes? Sorry.
Is that a yes or a no? Aye or nay?
are the houses all going to be built at the same time, or are they going to be built one by one?
What's the fuck?
Rachel, let's back up here. We need
Yes.
to finish, please. We have asked for a motion
Okay.
to classify, and we got a motion, we got a second, and so now we are looking for all those who are in favor of requiring or to classifying this as an unlisted action. And we got 3 ayes, and we're looking for your vote. It's either aye or nay. And then we can go to your question.
Okay. All right, fine.
No, just, is it aye or nay? Do you want to list this as an unlisted action or not?
No, I think, I mean, I think that because it's on such a steep slope and I don't know yet if he's building them one by one, that I wouldn't classify it as unlisted. Does it have to be unanimous?
No, you
No.
can abstain, and I could, it would be my advice that it would fall under an unlisted action under the way seeker classifies its actions. It wouldn't fit under any type 1 designation that I'm aware of, but that's certainly gonna abstain, and then it would be 3 and then 1 abstention.
Okay, I'll abstain.
Okay. Thank you. So we have that. It is now classified as an unlisted action. Rachel, go ahead with your questions. We want to go ahead and pose them right now. It's fine.
Yeah, wait, you say there's not gonna be any basements, but how much cut and fill? Because it looks like a very steep piece of land. And I see where the envelopes are, but it doesn't appear to me when you look at the property that those are very flat spaces. And so I'm wondering about the cut and fill, and I'm concerned about the complaints that people have made in the neighborhood about the smell of sewage and the runoff. So I would feel more comfortable if that were resolved.
Didn't Floyd's engineers go into this in detail? I've looked at these, the site plan, the drawings, the drainage. These are engineers, these are people qualified to give us expert information. And Floyd himself has built many, many houses and have done a wonderful job here in New Paltz.
I can respond to Rachel's couple questions there. These would be slab on grade houses. I feel I went through a few renditions on the lot layouts. I feel that this lot layout absolutely works the best with the lay of the land there, because you have the upper section and it drops off to the lower section. So I use that to my advantage to having these 2 lots facing Henry W. Du Bois. And I feel like I'm not doing that much in grading other than right along the one side, east side of the lot number one. Doing very minimal grading behind them so that I can reduce the disturbed area in the back of the properties. So I feel, and certainly your engineer can comment to that, that the grading is very minimal, and that it kind of works for what's there.
Are you going to be building all 4 houses at once, or is the construction going to be spread out over a few years?
So I don't have an answer to that question. The way my business plan works is I sell the lots to buyers, and then they choose what house they want to build, and then I have a contract to build with them. So I would certainly love to be able to sell all 4 of these lots right off the bat, and I would try to build them all right at the same time. But I can't say what the market's going to be for the time.
Just find that's very disturbing to the neighbors.
That's a big concern.
So, we looked at the lots now, and we're gonna get the report back, the final report from our engineer on the information we were requested. We have now voted it to be an unlisted action. We need to cover 2 other points. For instance, we need to identify any involved agencies that would be involved with this.
Yeah, I didn't think, but I guess if the applicant could just speak to that, if you're aware of anyone. I didn't think, I know, I think you had mentioned on the EAF potentially Ulster County Planning Board referral, which I don't believe that's required, but whether you're aware of any other approvals or from the county or anyone that would potentially be involved.
I only mentioned the county. I know the county has a side agreement or a separate agreement with the village. I don't know what it looks like now. I used to serve on the county planning board 20 years ago. So I know each municipality has a side agreement. I don't know where that stands, but I know you're within a certain proximity to a county or state highway. Right. But I know the village has exceptions to that. Otherwise, everything gets triggered to them. So I don't know. So I err towards saying.
Yeah, they're exempt from referral to the county planning board as long as, because you're fewer than 5 lots, as long as you don't have access roads or structures in the 100-year floodplain. Which I don't believe you do based on the EAF. You're not with floodplain.
No.
So you're exempt from the county. That was the only one you thought might be.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the planning board would be the only lead agents, the only involved agency for purposes of seeker, so you don't need to circulate a notice of intent. You'll just complete it on your own.
Complete the secret. Haven't gotten to that yet. So there was a mention of an interested agency, not involved agency, but an interested agency could be the Empire State Trail Authority. So what makes sure that they are notified. So then we're going to move on to the EAF Part 2. We're going to get the engineering report. As listed as an unlisted action under seeker, and we're just going to have to wait for the engineering information on the drainage and traffic, and we have to essentially wait. Anything else that we need to go through with on this actually? You want to go through the remaining issues that we need to have?
No, I think it makes sense to get your comments from the engineer and see which path you're going to go down, and everything else could follow.
Then we got some things such as the subdivision side note number 3. Correction on that. The others that you wanted to go through on this?
Yeah, I think that, I had some comments as far as one of the notes on the plans, but I think the first step is to see which path, because the plan's going to change regardless. So I think I think you've done what you could do tonight and figure out what, whether it's gonna be preliminary or just the final, and then could talk about anything else that comes up.
And one more
Sure,
question.
go ahead.
So, the Empire State Trail made me want to ask, Floyd, did you look at all at, the two driveways on lots 1 and 2 being more proximate than separate? Just given that what they would do is create two distinct interruptions to the pedestrians and cyclists, as opposed to maybe one that might be a little more visible and safer for someone who's a pedestrian or cyclist to be aware of. I don't know if it would be better if they were separate or together, but is that any thought you gave? Because it would seem like them two being distinct is it's harder to navigate than.
Sure, so you actually have a total of 3 on that side, with the, private road.
You already have.
Yeah, so, early on in the process, I was aware of that project and I had communicated with the consultants. They originally were gonna have a guardrail on that section. And they have to have a certain amount of guardrail between driveways anyway, which they wouldn't be able to do if I had more driveways here. The reason they had to do the guardrail because they couldn't grade further back into the properties, but I said I would certainly allow them to do that so that it could be separated more from the road and not have a guardrail. But as far as the proximity of the driveways, I'm not sure if I can make them side by side. Yeah. Just because of the need for the rain gardens on the downslope side, just the way gravity works with the stormwater. But you do have a third one there as well.
No, I know that. That's what I'm thinking. It cuts up the fastest there. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we're gonna wait to hear from Dennis Larios, and then determine whether we're gonna move directly to a final or we're ready to go to preliminary. We've got a list of questions from us, and we also have some information that's being requested by the neighbors, so hopefully we'll be able to address that on our next visit, and then we'll keep it moving along. Okay.
So you all will be in touch with Dennis on that part.
Yeah, we're gonna reach out to him tomorrow.
And then at that point, then we can determine if the public hearing is needed or no public hearing is needed, but based on whether it's preliminary.
Right, we'll set
Subdivision.
right. We'll set the public hearing and press forward on it. Okay, thank you. So the next item is PB 2206, 42 South Chestnut Street, Properties Prospect Estate LLC. Application for a site plan review to install a new driveway off Wilpont Road with 27 feet, 36 parking area. Talked about it being an R2 residential district. Improving it with an existing 5-bedroom single-family dwelling and a driveway off State 32, which will be abandoned as part of the application. We do need to refer this to county. We'll have to set a public hearing. So let's take a look at the revised plans. Welcome, gentlemen. So tell us a little bit what's going on.
Well, we did receive some comment and feedback from the building department, and addressed each one of those. The first one is we have a side yard and front yard setback that's pre-existing non-conforming, and Floyd did confirm that, and we've added that to the bulk table to clarify that. Second item, we did have the original driveway proposed as 27 feet wide. Village code only allows 18, so we've since revised that and reconfigured the parking so that it's 18 feet wide. The same number of spaces, just deeper instead of wider. So we now conform to the 18-foot requirement. The third item is along the same lines in terms of that the parking areas and the side yard setback. which is allowed if it's 18 feet or less wide. So now we conform to that as well. So that's a legal encroachment. In terms of the paver detail, we did submit.
I'm sorry, back on item 3, how was that resolved?
By reducing the width of the driveway to 18 feet wide.
The parking area does encroach onto the side yard setback.
Right, if you look at the Corey's,
Okay, got it.
right, it was 27, now it's
That's
18, so we're now in conformance on that. In terms of the driveway material detail, they were looking for a specific cut sheet, confirming the openness of it, and it is 40% open, and that is the figures that we used to figure out lot coverage requirements. So just wanted to confirm that. And also, I did look at Corey's calculation on the lot coverage figures, and I do agree. So we've also updated those figures to match what he had established as well.
Which is the final figure?
The 23.3 existing and 29.3 proposed. So we're still under the 30. Let's see. Item 5 was a zoning code review. Corey deemed it to be unnecessary based on what we were proposing. So there's no change related to that. Wanted to confirm whether they were required by the additional parking was actually required by code or not. Corey's determined that the additional parking would actually bring the property into compliance and be a welcome improvement. So, and that was the extent of the comment. So we've addressed each of those with the updated site plan.
So speak to me about what you're going to do with the front parking spaces that you're abandoning.
That's just going to become a seeded grass lawn area,
Okay.
which it pretty much already is now, and hasn't been used actively recently. So that would just be a seeded area.
Okay. All right, members of the board, any comments, discussions, anything that you want to weigh in on, please?
No, I looked at particularly what Corey said about the required parking. Looks to me like they conform with everything that Corey had required.
Okay. Any questions?
No, I don't.
Okay. So based on that, and then what we're going to do is we are going to make a referral of this to the county. You'll need to work with Autumn to get that, all taken care of. Then we need to look at a public hearing date. What is the next available public hearing date? We need to motion to refer this to county, or is that just?
I was just gonna say, if you want to do a motion to refer to
County.
county, then you could secondly do a motion for the public hearing.
All right, so I'd like to get a motion to refer this to the Oakland County Planning Board.
So motion.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
So this will be referred to county. Next, we want to look at, I'm sorry, what did you say the public hearing date would be on? So want to get a motion to set a public hearing for them on the 16th of August.
So motion.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
So we have reviewed the revised plans. We referred the application to the Oakland County Planning Board. Let's get the public hearing.
Did you want a resolution, a draft resolution prepared for the August 16th meeting?
Right, this is a pretty simple application, so I would like to get feel the board if we get these things accomplished. Are you comfortable with getting a resolution for approval of this application?
So motion.
Good.
Sure, sure.
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
And of course, anything that is raised at the public hearing would be addressed.
Right,
accordingly.
right. So that's what I'm saying. So would the resolution be contingent upon anything, or would it be a clear resolution? And if
It would be
anything-
drafted and then dependent on if there are comments made at the public that raise an issue that need to be addressed, it could be incorporated, or you could hold off until the next meeting if needed.
Then I think it would be.
All right, so I'd like to get a motion to create, to authorize our attorney to create a resolution of approval.
So motion.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we have, you're all set for the next series of steps, so, thank you, and we will see you very soon.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, the next one is, PV 2210, 11 Water Street. So, we have people who are part of that application. If you would, please come forward.
So, right, need some more chairs?
Yeah. Well, many chairs as you need. Welcome back, Barry. Long time no see.
Yes.
See, you still working on the same project.
Wait for the one, Moriel to find, and we'll be saying that again and again. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, why don't you give us a little bit of an overview of the project, where it is, what you're looking to do.
Winkleberry.
See what we've got going on.
Well, we'll introduce everybody first. The applicants.
I'm Ryan Giuliano, I'm one of the partners of Honorland Development.
I'm Jesse Halliburton, one of the partners of Honorland Development. So, this is a site that's on Water Street that has an existing warehouse type building that I think everybody's familiar with.
The old box factory.
Yes, I guess that's what it was, box factory. It's right up against the old former railroad, the rail trail now. And their proposal is to basically replace the building in a very, not exact footprint, very similar footprint with a hotel building. I think we're on 26 rooms now, 26 rooms. Don't have a lobby area. We have adequate parking on site. You know, we're gonna modify the road frontage there. Right now, it's kind of just wide open pavement right up to the building. We'll put some curbing, some, landscape tiles in there so that we'll have a reasonable traffic flow. The property, the building height now is 3 floors, right?
Stories.
Yeah, there's 3 stories, basically. One walk out on the street level. The second one will be close to the railroad level, and then another level above that. We have some architectural buildings and elevations, floor plans. We have water and sewer right there. There's drainage on the site. We haven't prepared a drainage plan yet. This is still in concept form. We need to do that. I'm sure we'll be putting some surface storage in, but the site is heavily covered with impervious cover now. So we're probably going to change that a little bit.
Yeah. Change it by increasing or?
No, I hope we would decrease it. I haven't done the calculations yet, but I think we would be looking to add some more green space.
So do you own the, as you're looking at the front of the property, to the left is the driveway that they use, the big door in the driveway, and there was what was a residential property at one time. It still has the stairs leading up to it. Did you purchase that property as well?
It's that property and it's the property to the left of that.
13 Water Street.
Okay. So, are you going to reduce the, are you gonna do a lot of removal of that whole area to make it a standard grade across?
We're not doing anything on the residential lot.
Okay.
We're just working up to it. It's shown on the map, it's just a adjacent parcel, we didn't put the building on or anything.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm sure you're all aware of the drainage problems in that area, and how it comes down from Pencil Hill, and it comes down from the other apartment projects, it comes down from the land that's next between Pencil Hill Road and between the apartment complex. And it doesn't always drain. And that in the wintertime, it forms a wonderful ice cream, small children. But it's a difficulty. And then to the side to the right side of where you're building, you have runoff that comes from essentially the entire village, from the college on down. It cascades down through that area. And well, no, with the drain pipe that comes through the property on Worth Avenue, then goes into the creek of the waterway, and then it goes underneath the road, and then it exits out and goes into the wall field just to the right of your property.
By the
Yeah,
secondary
yeah.
parking.
It's more on the north side of our site, we're
Correct.
talking about that big, yeah, does that overflow?
You know,
Seems like that's
it
pretty-
doesn't, I just you're aware of how it tends to flow pretty hard there during
Yeah,
severe
oh,
rain.
I'm sure it does.
The last time, the flat flooded,
Mhm.
I went over just to see.
Right,
And I couldn't believe that there was just one little puddle. I
yeah,
was stunned at how good the drainage was, that time.
yeah, it still drains through there even when there's a significant flooding within the flats, and the river.
Yeah, just say it's quite high compared to the wall, we're way above the flood elevation.
Yeah.
I noticed that in the question, 7 answered that it wasn't, but it's only by recollection, but I thought I remember this is in the 100-year flood. It was it once and then it was relieved.
Well,
That
and it was
designation?
released from, as I remember, actually, do you remember that?
Yeah, I can comment on that a little bit. The oldie maps did show it,
Right.
but they were not accurate.
Because they, at one point, some of them were divided, the only thing they could do was put a horse farm or something of that nature there, but except for
Well,
the land.
I'm not familiar with any of that. All I know is when I first started investigating this property, it came up as if it was in the flood plain. Then when we looked at the current maps and we looked at the elevations, or we took a hard look at it, it's not. It's above, and I can provide more detail and information to clarify that. Because that was one of my first concerns too. And I know there's some drainage on the property. We haven't fully investigated it, but other than what you told me about the icing, and I think that may have to do with their, a lot of the drainage flows right up against the building, just
It
real
does.
clean. And there's an inlet there. And I suspect that may be problematic, whether it clogs up or maybe it's just totally inadequate
Yeah, there
or
is a
something.
inlet there.
Yeah, and so we're gonna be investigating, we'll probably be replacing all that stuff.
Yeah.
So we will have a complete drainage study on the site. Make sure it's properly. Certainly don't increase any problems.
In terms of the use, other than the 26 rooms, is there any other food service or cafe or anything else planned?
There is a cafe on the first floor along with as you can see, a small lounge area right here. We have a cafe, a small kitchen. The kitchen itself is 340 square feet of space. It's not a dining room per se, but there will be some food and beverage amenities for the guests and for everyone else who passes through.
I have a question. I'm very, very, very familiar with the property. Are you gonna raise the building and put a complete new structure?
Yes, we will.
You will, because you'll use the utilities that are existing. Well, this will be a welcome change. That's an extremely important part of New Paltz. A few years back, we changed the zoning when I was on the planning board to make it part of the Gateway District. Right now, and I understand there are lots of issues that people have to deal with, but right now it's an eyesore. I run past that. I live about 300 yards down on Plains Road. And what you guys are going to do is a welcome improvement to that property. And thanks a lot for doing it.
I live up on Worth Avenue and we traverse the rail trails as long as it's still traversable.
Yes, but to answer your initial question, we will be having a small food and beverage on the property. And, you know, to the size of the guest count of the hotel itself. You know, it isn't a fine dining establishment. We won't be marketing it in the sense of to the general public, but obviously if you don't able to access it, so it's more for them.
What is going to be your maximum occupancy?
Well, the 26 rooms, you know, and we know what we have as historical data is roughly around, you know, 1.8 people per room on average. So, you know, at max capacity, you can probably see the building go up to roughly around 50 to 55 people. That's if they're, you know, traveling together. Parking. You have the adequate parking for requirements of the.
And where is this adequate parking?
Right on the property. One second. Right there.
How many is it?
I think, yeah.
I mean, this is what's in your code.
Right.
And that's why that's the one park per class, and then, what is it, one per employee, or sorry, 3 for every 20 classes per employee. So we have 4 employees and 26 for the, you know, the rooms, and then another 2 for, I'm sorry, 2 of them, that adds up to the 30, and then the 2 of them will be handicapped.
I'm not, you know, huge proponent for more parking than needed at all. But that would be tight, you know, you have 2 guests in the room and you just have 4 people drive up and meet, and, you know, so
sometimes if one car comes in, it takes the rooms.
that's ridiculous.
You know, so that's where he has the statistics on it.
Yeah, we have seen in most cases, groups of people that are staying in a room together are sharing a car. And what we've seen as well too with products like this within a village, at least for the New York City traveler, we're getting a lot of travelers up and picking buses up. And it's, you know, with our whole model and our thought process is walkability. You know, you're hearing about and seeing a lot of these hospitality developments in the area that are taking over large swaths of land and doing cabins and glamping and everything's, you know, need to get in the car to go anywhere. But our thought process is people come to the town, if they are driving, they're parking on our property. You know, parking itself in New Paltz is difficult already, so there's going to be no need for them to take it off of our property and they can walk through the attractions in the village.
Your question? Well, I think there'll be a lot of work. But you may also just be familiar with where you've indicated the access and egress onto the property is a challenging place to drive, so in terms of, you know, safety and visibility, and then this, of course, the Mohawk onto Water Street, you know, 30-degree turn is something that you often can't remake without impinging on the other property.
We get a lot of consideration for that, and that's why we put the entrance rate with the stop line dark. And River Street, we have our entrance right there where the cars have to stop before it. And that's kind of the same thing with coming off of Plains Road.
Right, the entrance right there in front of where the cars would stop. The only one which is just open on the road is the upper parking lot area.
With the removal of the existing building, it's gonna open up the sight line for cars to move.
Yeah, we're creating a lot more space.
Right now, that building's right on the edge.
You have a drawing that would have the shadow of the existing?
I have a highlighted one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's perfect. The green is the existing.
Yeah, green is the
Yeah, I'm not sure we move on.
That's something you want to surrender?
Existing building outline, yeah.
I thought of that this afternoon. So, thank you.
That's significantly reduced.
That was one of the things that we really looked at as, obviously, that's a blind term. Yeah, it's existing, it's scary, you know, what it is, but that portion of the building is really 2,000 square feet of space.
Yeah, well, 13,000.
You know, the stuff.
Oh, that.
Juts out.
Right, the piece that will then convert to parking.
The proposed building is significantly smaller footprint wise than the existing, and sort of allowed us to also move it back towards the rail trail a little bit more so that guests can engage with the trail itself and be part of the trail. We're going to plan on having a patio back there and things like that. And just the way I saw it was as a linear park, you get to see like all different kinds of things while you're on the trail, right? That's nice thing. But the idea with this is that, you know, you get to engage with the guests and see the patio and landscaping and that kind of thing. And then in addition, with the location of it, what we're thinking was that it sort of has a foot in nature, you know, and then it has a foot in the village. So the idea is to use traditional forms, because eventually we will go to the historic commission. And so you try to use historic forms, but at the same time, do natural colors and natural materials. And we're hoping to have a solar roof garden, at least some part of it. So with solar panels and then a pollinator garden for these butterflies and all of it. And so we thought it was a good way to sort of tie in the nature part that we're stepping into it to the more commercial area and the village.
Of course, the sight line from the Water Street Market too, looking down from that parking lot. Gonna be able to look right down onto some of the.
What's the existing height of the current building?
The tallest bridge point is 25 feet. And then with an effort of trying to get some slope grooves in, which I've requested before, I will need a variance. Right now I have about, the highest point is about 37 feet.
Okay.
34.
Actually, what's the code on the height?
I would have to look that up, but 35 sounds like it would be.
35 feet is usually it. I have one question. I've looked at extensively at this, but how many parking places are you planning?
I believe it's 40.
How many?
30.
Oh, 30.
I
Okay.
thought it was 40 on the plan.
No.
Doesn't look like it.
Is that
That's
it?
what I thought.
Well, that's what the bulk table says. So I
The
don't know.
bulk
how-
table said 40 and you actually count them.
Actually, the zoning requirement that has to gate right here. On the table.
Yeah, 35 feet, I believe that's correct.
No,
We're talking about
parking.
the parking
Oh,
on your bulk table.
Going back to parking, I'm sorry.
I actually only counted 20 of it. There's not 40.
Building height is 35 feet, but
Yeah.
the parking, I guess, is question.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the comment.
Okay, so we're talking about three different things here.
Yeah, I see
So,
that.
Right.
That's okay. So the the bulk table states a different parking number than what you're saying according to our attorney. So we have 30 here on the zoning requirements for gateway parking actually. And it says 30.
Yeah, so the bulk table is saying that it's showing required is 40 and proposed is 40. I don't know if that's just a typo or. It's saying one room for each, one per each of the 26 rooms, and then one.
And then 4 for the employees.
And then the ADA is included in the.
That'd be part of the 30. Yeah.
So I think that maybe is just, it should be 30 listed. And I believe 30 are shown, it's just saying 40.
Saying 30. Is that what you said, 30?
I think 30 is what's shown, but the bulk table is saying that it's 40. Unless I'm looking at an older plan, perhaps.
Yeah, I don't see 40 anywhere.
We have 30 listed here on this proposed site plan.
Okay, this must be this plan says draft on it, so I guess maybe it's.
Right.
Oh, we must have something. Yeah, we have a lot of drafts.
Sorry. It might have just been an old one, that's.
Okay, so yeah, we're still in the preliminary stages here, so let's make sure that we get a single one that we're going to be working off of.
The plan we have is dated May 25th, 2022. And that should
Yeah,
be
that's
the
all
only
we have.
plan that's out there. That should be the
Okay,
only.
so May 25.
May 25, rather, yes.
I'm looking at one that says May 6th.
Yeah.
Yeah, we probably have a draft version we were kicking around among ourselves. I'm not sure how it's.
But the long and short of it is you're figuring 26, one for each room, and then 4 additional.
Yes.
All right.
There's on the May 6th, it does say 40. So we'll just need to make sure we're all working on the same page.
To make them taste good.
As long as I didn't lose my mind and.
And, in terms of the ratio and staff, I don't know exactly these calculations, but it's for 20 and you have 26 rooms. Is it
Oh,
just
no, don't worry about it.
in terms of the ratio, or is it
That's
no
absolutely.
increment number 20?
Oh. I could, so.
Do we have to do 3 more when you're in excess of the 20?
Those are turning.
Or is it, you can incrementally add just 1 to account for the 26 rooms?
I don't know. We added 4, so we added a proportion. We have 3 for the first one.
Right, you did it proportionally. I'm just making sure that that's the way it's supposed to be.
That's for us to say. I think that's up to the town to decide.
Okay. All right, so to get down to business, then we need to classify this action based upon the information discussed with the attorney. We want to get a motion to classify this as an unlisted action under seeker.
So motion.
Second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. So we have that. We're going to need to get you guys, and actually correct me if I'm wrong on any of these next steps here. We'll need to ask you to submit a revised EAF and a special use permit narrative, and then you are going to need to go for a variance.
Sure, so I guess just touching on that, the revised EAF, I noted that there was the question about stormwater discharge, I believe, was answered that you wouldn't be creating any. So that should be yes, and address the other subparts of that question. And then also make sure you identify, if you're gonna need a variance, then the village ZBA would be identified as another agency that needs to give an approval. I think that's question 2. It's one of the early questions on the form. That way, if the board's going to coordinate its review, it knows who it needs to send a notice to.
Okay, those are on the questions. Did you do these online through with the finder, the mapper?
Yeah.
So there's not a critical environment, the Wallkill is not a critical environmental area or any of those?
We always do it online. If it doesn't show up on it,
It can show up.
I can look at that in a while. See what I have there.
Statements, the critical environmental area.
I came up with yes for the historic places, and yes for archaeological, and yes for wetland.
Enough for state listed critical. And then 8A, proposed action result in substantial increase in traffic above present levels. I would say, 26 rooms and 30 parking spaces on a very narrow, difficult to traverse corner of our village. Substantial is a subjective word maybe, but I would say that's something we should all discuss. And I would recommend yes, unless there's some legal reason we don't have to. I agree with you because right now the box factory doesn't generate very much traffic. And the hotel will certainly be generating.
Hey, John and Rich, one thing popped in my head. Have they discussed it with Tom Olson?
No, they still need to go before the historical board.
Well, even if they had an informal discussion, he's a good guy to deal with. And I think that's very important.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, those were my suggested changes. And then I had the question about the 100-year plan, but we resolved that, and the stormwater is also something. Sure, that should be mentioned.
So just to recap on the EAF, the question I had mentioned, it was question 17 about the stormwater.
Yeah.
And then I also did have a comment that the Ulster County records, it looks like the property is owned by an LLC, Water Street Trails LLC. So if you could submit an owner's authorization, I think it's included in the application packet, but it just needs to be signed on behalf of that LLC.
How about it, right?
I think we do, yeah. We're a single member that owns Water Street Trail LLC. So Honor Land owns that particular LLC. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, it just wasn't clear from the actual paperwork, so it might be you need to just write it, clarify that you're signing as the member of the LLC or something like that. I don't think it mentioned the LLC on the actual form.
No problem.
Is there any reason that the residential property that occupies this corner of Mohawk and Water Street's not named?
13 Water Street?
No, Mohawk. I think it's 2 Mohawk or 1 Mohawk. 2 Mohawk is here, and this is 1 Mohawk.
Name?
The property owners are labeled Teresa Fall. It's Teresa Fall.
Okay.
You're saying we didn't show the wall of the adjacent line.
Right.
We'll get that done.
And then on the other side, you have Caffrey Property Management. Caffrey's 2 Mohawk, Teresa listed 1. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We've been in contact with all of them.
Then farther down the street here.
You want to see
on the survey.
Anything else we need to cover on that? You say we can keep this? Yeah, we also need a site visit consent from you guys.
you have that ready.
Is there a name for the business?
Like a branded name?
Yeah, still working on it. All right, well, I think that covers just about everything then. Ashley, anything else we need to cover? Is that,
No, just procedurally, ultimately, it will have to get referred to the Ulster County Planning Board and you will need a public hearing, but I think the first step is starting the seeker process once you get that revised EAF and further detailed plans. I think the building inspector would also, I'd imagine, do a zoning code review.
okay? And then when we do the public hearing, we'll need to send a notice of public hearing. For it as well. All right, so I think we're kind of at a stopping point. Thank you for coming in. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for your time.
We'll look forward to
Thanks very much.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's the end of the business for tonight. So if I may please, I'd like to get a motion to adjourn.
So motion.
Second, please. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Good
all very
job,
much.
John.
And everyone.
Thanks.
Good night.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel and Ashley and Dennis.